President Trump is making his second Supreme Court pick in less than 2 years in the White House. The picks are, of course, historic, and they will certainly carry legal consequences for a generation. And central to the president's selection of Judge Brett Kavanaugh last night was the Federalist Society.
Probably been hearing a lot about this. This is a conservative think tank, a group of conservatives and libertarians who describe themselves as a group dedicated to reforming the current legal order. And the society has spent decades tracking and grooming conservative lawyers and judges, helping them to get nominated to higher courts. Jennifer Braceras is an attorney, a spokesperson for the Federalist Society here in Boston, and a senior fellow with the Independent Women's Forum. Thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, right off the bat, what did you think of Judge Kavanaugh's nomination?
I think it's an excellent pick. I think everybody on the president's list was highly qualified for the post, but Judge Kavanaugh perhaps most of all, with his wide range of experience, his over a decade already on the bench, and his stellar academic credentials.
And lots of decisions to pour over the next few months. The Federalist Society helped put together this list of judges that President Trump should nominate from. Gorsuch came from that list.
Correct.
Kavanaugh came from that list. So this group, which is funded by outside money, presents names to the president, and the president then picks from those. Is that healthy for making sure we're coming up with independent-minded judges? Is it
yes,
really a democratic process?
Well, I'll tell you why. The past two Democratic presidents, Clinton and Obama, were both lawyers themselves. And in fact, their wives were lawyers, right? So the Clintons had attended Yale Law School. The Obamas had attended Harvard. They knew very well, coming into the presidency, the types of people that they would like to appoint to the court. And indeed, they were probably friends with many of the people who were on their mental shortlists. Republican presidents haven't had that background, right? Even H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and now President Trump, not lawyers and not as familiar with the bench and bar, so to speak. So it makes sense that they would defer to experts in the field, people who know the players. And the one time you really did not see that happen was when President George W. Bush selected Harriet Miers for the Supreme Court. And what happens is when a president is not a lawyer and he doesn't rely on experts in the field, he tends to defer to cronyism, and he picks his friends. And Harriet Miers, by all accounts, was a wonderful person.
He ended up pulling Harriet Miers.
He ended up pulling her because she wasn't qualified for the job.
As a matter of fact, I think it's interesting. I've read some articles in which the Federalist Society said at the time, we're not very familiar with her. So that sent a signal to the Bush White House that she didn't really have the conservative credentials they were looking for.
Well, it wasn't that she didn't have the conservative credentials. She didn't have the legal credentials. Right. She probably was politically quite conservative, but that wasn't the point.
They didn't think
she wasn't ready for prime time.
Right. And speaking of prime time, as the questioning begins in the Senate for Judge Kavanaugh, we know in recent decades, ever since the Bork decision, it has evolved. What do you think the focus of the questioning will be for Judge Kavanaugh? And because Roe versus Wade in particular seems to be the issue that is being talked about predominantly, what do you think his views are on abortion rights?
Well, I think the focus, as you said, will be on Roe versus Wade. I don't think that that's necessarily a good thing for the system, but I think it will be on that mainly because it raises money. And so Democratic senators can make a big point of affirming their support for abortion rights, and it helps to fill their coffers for re-election. So I do think the focus will be on that. I don't think the American people themselves need to focus on that so much because we don't even know if an abortion-related case will come before the court. And even if it does, Roe itself has been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court several times. So the issue before the court will only be to what extent can state jurisdictions and local jurisdictions regulate within the framework of Roe.
It'll be potentially a chipping away as opposed to an actual Roe v. Wade overturning. The other issue that's making headlines this week, Kavanaugh wrote a law review article in 2009. I know you're familiar with this, arguing that Congress should pass a law exempting presidents from being investigated or sued. President Trump, of course, faces both of those issues right now. He faces a possible subpoena at this point from Robert Mueller. That would probably go to the Supreme Court, whether or not a sitting president can be subpoenaed and forced to testify. Where do you think Brett Kavanaugh would stand on that position of whether a president can be subpoenaed?
Well, I think they will ask him about that next week, but I think he was very clear in his article that he thought that Congress should pass a law to protect the president from those sorts of investigations, because politically it distracted him from the work of the nation. He did not say that the president already had a right to be insulated from those things, or that the courts could grant those rights. And in fact, as a judicial conservative, my guess is he would not think the courts could grant such a right. In fact, he would be deferential to Congress, which in this case has not acted.
Oh, so you think he would allow a subpoena of President Trump?
That would be my guess.
Wow,
yeah.
Interesting.
And quickly, you think he gets confirmed?
I do.
Excellent. All right, Jennifer Braceras, thanks so much for
Thanks
coming
for
in
having
tonight.
me.
It was very nice chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming in.